The Islamic finance industry grew very fast in the 90s, early 2000. Actually, the priority is, especially in certain jurisdiction, is to get products to market, to give an Islamic equivalent to the more prevalently used conventional products like mortgages and bonds and funds, etc., to make sure that we have a solution that is generally Sharia compliant. So that was the priority at that time. But then the speed of that growth meant that the operational side does not keep up, or it's not always there to match the growth of the product structures, right? I think it's as you rightly pointed out, it has to be more transparent. I think we can't gatekeep Sharia principles, Sharia maxims, and the structures. It has to be made known. It has to be elaborated so that they understand. In order for Islamic finance to scale up, we have to go beyond the Islamic finance players. We have to go beyond the Islamic finance industry or the jurisdictions that has that Islamic finance infrastructure. We have to go beyond that. Otherwise, we will not move that 5 trillion marker that we have currently.
Maya Marissa Malek, welcome to Majlis and Markets.
Thank you, Hassan.
Really, Walaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Maya, it's really great having you on the podcast. I've always sought your thoughts and counsel on whenever I'm writing articles on Islamic finance. But Maya, I really got you here because you're very well known in the Islamic finance industry, both from, let's say, a regulatory and advisory side, more probably on the advisory side, but also I think you've also helped some jurisdictions with Islamic finance or Sharia-compliant finance. But Maya, just as an icebreaker, could you give our listeners and viewers just a quick overview of your background story?
Sure. As you know, Hassan, I've always enjoyed our conversation. As you know, I've spent over 2 decades actually in Islamic finance. First is actually building and running one of the leading Sharia advisory practices globally across, the different markets like there's GCC, Southeast Asia, UK, US, Central Asia. And what taught me actually is that Islamic finance genuinely has world-class scholarly foundations. Actually, the next step for me is actually to look at or to build a world-class commercial infrastructure around these foundations. So that's why now I'm focusing on Sābiq, actually, which is, I hope it is built to cover the gap or to fill in the gap. And Sābiq is actually built around what we call Sharia value chain integration. And the simple version of this is actually we want to make sure that Sharia intent, one of your questions actually, I want to make sure that Sharia intent is not just live in the documentation. It travels through the entire life of a particular transaction, from the governance design, how the product is structured, how it is actually executed and implemented, how it's overseen and audited. Because most of the Sharia risk, if you agree, is not in the fatwa. It's not in the Sharia approval. The risk sits in everything that happens after the fatwa is issued and before the Sharia audit, right? So that's where Sābiq operates. So that's the space that I'm looking at right now.
Fantastic. And I think, you're very modest. You've worked on some really groundbreaking transactions at your previous organization. I remember you were telling me you were working with like private equity and some of these other big American, institutional investors. So you've worked with all different kinds of clients, right?
Yes. I've had that pleasure and the blessings to work across the different spectrum of Islamic finance. Yeah.
Amazing. And Maya, you touched on a point just now when I sent you some of the discussion points. I wrote an article, which I'll link in the show notes. And I think you're quoted in the article as well. It was for the Wired Middle East. I was looking at how can Islamic finance or can Islam influence fintech and finance by extension? And just now you've mentioned about, it's not just in the documentation. What would you say are some of the operational gaps with implementing, like Islamic finance within, a transaction?
The industry grew very fast, as you can see, comparatively speaking. So the Islamic finance industry grew very fast in the 90s, early 2000. Actually, the priority is, especially in certain jurisdiction, is to get products to market, to give an Islamic equivalent to the more prevalently used conventional products like mortgages and bonds and funds, etc., to make sure that we have a solution that is generally Sharia compliant. So that was the priority at that time. And the scholars, they worked incredibly hard to make that happen together with the other stakeholders of the industry. But then the speed of that growth meant that it can mean that the operational side does not keep up, or is not it's not always there to match the growth of the product structures, right? So at the end of the day, you would have this really interesting product structure on paper, and then the execution part is where you find bits and pieces that needs revamping, that needs more work. For instance, you have the first stage, we had commodity murabaha. So, how the commodity moves in the execution part on paper is great, but how does the commodity move? Or how does a fund is subjected to screening? How do you have a really practical screening methodology that does not compromise Sharia principles? And then what about how does the bank book the transactions? Is there a difference between a full-fledged bank and also, let's say, an Islamic window or an Islamic unit within a conventional parent bank? So this gap in between, it doesn't fully reflect what was approved. So it's not really a theological problem or a theology problem. It's more of an industry maturity problem. So we are at the stage where I think we are ready to solve. Not just ready, I think this is where we have to look into this space so that the industry is more scalable, more sustainable. So these gaps differ. As you can have ijara implemented in a sukuk versus ijara implemented in a real estate fund. So there may be certain differences in terms of how it is being implemented. So this needs to be looked at carefully. We cannot have that cookie cutter approach, and there's no one single function that does this. I think it's fragmented depending on who. Okay, legal documents or the product side or the monitoring side, the risk side. So it's a bit fragmented. So I think now we are at the cusp of the age of Islamic finance where this part is very critical. Yeah. So
Maya, one of the things I wanted to ask you, you gave a really nice summary there, of the growth of Islamic finance industry and where it's come from and where it seems to be going, the trajectory wise. But if we look at banks or if we look at asset managers, do you think they always prioritize Sharia compliance or Sharia within their processes? So, like, what I'm getting at is, like, in the quote that you gave me for that article, you said that Sharia shouldn't just be an afterthought; it should be like the primary goal, in
yeah.
addition to a profit-making entity. Do you think that banks and asset managers always prioritize that?
I think right now they do. I mean, frankly speaking, because I deal directly with the banks and the asset managers. I think right now the concern is not, okay, can we have a fatwa? But the concern is, how can we ensure we meet the Sharia guidelines? How do we do this practically? What do we need to put in our processes, for instance, to ensure that the Sharia guidelines are met? And more often than not, there's a whole lot of discussions from between both parties, the Sharia advisors as well as the banks and the asset managers, to understand further, and on both sides actually, what would be practical, what would be the hard stops that they can't do, and what would be more of something that can be implemented on a gradual. So I think the understanding about Sharia has expanded beyond just getting the approval and waiting for the Sharia audit at the end of the day. Yeah, which is a good indication.
Yeah, because we'll get on to Maqasid and SRI and your thoughts on that. But, you've worked in a Sharia advisory, you have your own advisory now. What does a typical day look like for a Sharia advisory firm?
Oh, okay. It's very interesting actually, because we look at Sābiq, we have a team that covers the different aspects of that value chain. So you would have, let's say we have a new thing coming, and you have different hats by one by by different people. So the discussion is always enriching. And what I encourage us to do is actually not have our discussions in silo. Actually, we usually pull in the clients for us to get better understanding and for them to get a better understanding of the Sharia because I see, Sharia advisors and the clients, we are actually partners, business partners, as opposed to, you sit on the opposite side of the table because you want to make sure that the transaction, both parties want to make sure that the transactions are Sharia compliant end to end. So I think for us, we always have that active discussion, trying to understand, and the more we understand, the better the case will be when we bring this to our Sharia board. And even with our Sharia board, I encourage, they actually want more discussions and highlighting of the strategic points, the material points for them to understand fully what the structure is about. Yeah, so it's kind of interesting. We learn new things from the clients, which enriches the way we see things and with the way we give our advice and opinions.
And you've worked with, like, say, the big institutional, like I mentioned, the big institutional American asset managers. I think you've also worked with crypto players as well as like banks as well. What kind of skill sets do you need to be within a Sharia advisory?
Wow, I have the ideal skill set. I don't think it's that easy to find. A Sharia advisor for the next decade at least is someone who can sit in a room with, a product developer, the lawyer, tax advisor, the risk guys, regulator, and still be a credible voice in all these conversations, because as I mentioned, as you alluded earlier, Sharia is needs to be the driving force, the overarching principle. So the Sharia advisor needs to understand enough these different aspects and ask the right questions and still put Sharia at the forefront. Sharia as that needs to be applied in a way that makes sense, in a way that is real and can be implemented by the clients, by the asset managers or the banks. So in short, I think the Sharia advisor that we need in the future, or at least in the near future, is someone who can do that. Someone who can sit in a room with the different people from the different function and still have a credible voice in all this conversation.
Do you ever have times where you have tension with, say, clients who, they want to maximize shareholder return or ROI, or they want, some commercial goal? Is there ever a time, or has there ever been a time in your, your 2 decades or more of Sharia
Yeah.
advisory, of where the client, has tension with Sharia?
Tension with Sharia.
Yeah, like, he just wants to get something, or they want to get something done, but they see Sharia or Sharia compliance as, say, like a, not, I don't want to say a barrier, but like as just another hurdle they need to jump over in order to get something across the line.
Mm. Well, of course, not just about profit maximization, not just about business as usual, but also, there are many aspects that I wouldn't say create tension, but to lack of understanding, probably of the other party's concerns and how they do things. So it's quite common actually. That's why I think it's best that the Sharia discussion happens early on. The thing that I think can have a bit of an impact if the Sharia is brought in at the later stage and the expectation is just to rubber stamp because accordingly everything has been done based on previous precedents or whatever. I think that part is actually not going to make things go faster because something that is material from a Sharia may not be material under different lens, I would say. So yeah, there have been, but I think it's part and parcel of making sure that the product is robust enough and all the T's are crossed, all the I's are dotted. So it's quite expected, I would say, to have that.
You come in as an external Sharia advisor. Do you think, like, banks or asset managers or other IFIs, internal Sharia practitioners or advisors or board, do you think they always, like, there may be a little bit of bias there?
Uh, Basically, Sharia, the principles are consistent across the board. right? So it's consistent across the board. And the thing about we talk about standardization, harmonization. It's actually there, and it's actually helpful. And you have AUFI, you have IFSB doing the essential work, and more and more institutions are adopting this frameworks. The interpretation of Sharia, I think there's not much difference because you can't, right? It comes from the same sources of law, but it's more of different needs of different markets, and maybe you know forcing uniformity that probably can flatten, what do you call that, legitimate differences. I think it's something to be looked at carefully, because Islamic jurisprudence, we always have that scholarly diversity, like you ikhtilaf, so you have different interpretations, but not the fundamentals, the different interpretation because of the customs or the requirements of that particular jurisdiction. I think to your question, it is part and parcel of the industry, and I don't see it going away anytime soon. Structured, I would say, because then you have less discretion with more and more legal frameworks from the HSA of the country, for instance. And although it's different from one country to another, but at least it's governed by a clear, transparent framework. So you differ within the framework.
And there's obviously AI has been a big thing in a lot of industries. I've had people on the show before who have said, this is the end of Sharia scholars. We had Sharia scholar Dr. Akram Lalidin, who I'll link in the show notes, very well known Sharia scholar, saying he uses AI as well. What kind of role does AI play in your activities?
Well, we do have AI. We do use AI. I think in the near future, I'll be in a position to let you know further how we use AI. It's always as a tool, not as a resource, right? And also it helps to actually it can be a repository of the different, I've looked at numerous structures, right? And it can be a repository of those different rulings that we have done, or at least I have seen or worked on over the years, that can be used. It's not lost. So I think that is something that we can use AI for. It can be more if making the work more efficient, because you have, let's say, screening methodologies that's quite standard in the market, and you can use that and do the work faster. The thing that is very important to note is, being a Sharia advisor, issuing opinions, and for Sharia boards issuing the fatwa, it comes with accountability and responsibility, and also deep knowledge and understanding, which is very difficult for AI to take over. So I don't see the role of Sharia scholars being obsolete. I don't think so, because that interpretation is something that it's a science by itself. And it comes to give that signature. It comes with a lot of accountability, a lot of thinking process, a lot of questions and answers that and also, the market evolves, the requirement evolves, the legal framework, tax framework evolves. So you need to be at the forefront of this innovation and this change and evolution of the ecosystem. So Sharia advisors or Sharia scholars will need to keep pace with that. Maybe AI is slightly behind. Because as you know, some of the structures, especially the private market, the alternative structure, you don't have that many literature on it. There's not many literature on it, and it's not made public. So these are a lot of studies, a lot of research, a lot of ijtihad being done. It's not part of the AI data. So moving forward, I think it's going to be more and more. But as a tool, of course, we have to embrace it as a tool.
Yeah, no, it seems that things like AI would be good things like publicly declared documents, like for equities and for screening, like you said, and used as research. But I think using it as a standalone, tool, come up with fatwa without the human need, I think is still a long way off. And it seems.
Mm.
But do you think Sharia scholars, are embracing this, or do you think they need to, be a bit more open towards it? Like, what do you think?
I, I think they are already open. towards it. It's not something that can be ignored. I can't speak on behalf of the scholars, but what I know is, it is being used as a tool to make sure that it's, the review is faster, or the references being made, checking, counter checking. Sometimes you need to understand certain terminology, or certain principle, how it is being applied in the conventional sense, for us, for us to see what would be the more suitable principles or legal maxims that can be used. So it is being used, and they are open to it. I don't think, well, at least I've not heard of any Sharia advisor or Sharia scholars that's not open to it.
It's the things like AI Maya, it has its biases, and obviously it sources a lot of this from public information. And depending on who programmed the AI chatbot or the AI
Mhm.
program, can have like a bias politically or financially, or and like you said, right, you still need to like make sure have the human
Yeah.
input there. But the other thing I wanted to ask you about this idea of integration, right? You've got this Sharia advisory firm. You've worked at a Sharia advisory firm before. What do you think needs to be done to make Islamic finance more, transparent and more open, or appear more opening towards, say, non-Islamic investors?
I think it's as you rightly pointed out, it has to be more transparent. I think we can't gatekeep uh, Sharia principles, Sharia maxims, and the structures. It has to be made known. It has to be uh, elaborated so that they understand. Um, and I mean, in order for Islamic finance to scale up, we have to go beyond the Islamic finance players. We have to go beyond the Islamic finance industry, or the jurisdictions that has that Islamic finance infrastructure. We have to go beyond that. Otherwise, we will not move that 5 trillion marker that we have currently. So we have to go into the bigger market. And what is needed is actually, I think, to listen and have a conversation that is more of a solution finding solutions, solve problem solving, rather than stopping it here. Oh no, it's not Sharia compliant. So I think we have to have that problem solving mindset to nurture the growth. And how do we do that? We have to make sure that they understand the whole process. And as Sharia advisor, we also have to understand that there's no one process, there's no one set process. So Sharia can be applied in different permutations of the same process, like screening. We can apply it in this way and that way, for instance, right? So coming to a mindset of, I think, working together rather than checking each work, which is different, right? I think that would be, at least you bring people on the same side towards the same objective. Yeah, I think that's important.
Over the past decade or so, even probably longer, you've always talked about the alignment between, ESG, environmental social governance, and SRI, social responsible investing, and Maqasid al-Shariah. I know
Mm-hmm.
you've talked about this a lot on different platforms and
Mm-hmm.
with your work as well. But if we're just sticking on the green and the SRI for a second before we go to Maqasid, do you see like a big uptake of green and SRI Islamic products? Like in my mind, I'm thinking of something like Sukuk is a very easy one, but do you see like it going beyond Sukuk?
Even Sukuk, I think it's not enough. Green Sukuk, SRI Sukuk, it's not enough. Whether it goes beyond the Sukuk, it should, because that's what Sharia is all about. As you know, there's a lot of overlap between ESG and Sharia, avoidance of harm, generating social benefit and long-term impact and whatnot, which is what Maqasid it has for centuries. Obviously, in a much deeper scale. That philosophical alignment between ESG and Maqasid is actually amazing, But the industry hasn't fully capitalized on it on this as yet. From a opportunity perspective, I think there's significant missed opportunity. I would say, like Green Sukuk, it should be a natural product actually for Islamic finance, because the values align. Investor is also looking towards more and more ESG or ethical based products. And then let's say in Malaysia, in the UAE, there's regulatory support. But as you know, I mean, as you can see as well, the uptake is not is slower than what it should be. I think the core, maybe one of the challenge is when it's a green sukuk as opposed to a green bond. So a green sukuk, you're looking at two frameworks at the same time, right? So you're looking at the Sharia framework, and there's also that the ESG framework based on the different principles in the world, the global principles on ESG. And these two frameworks, most of the time they run parallel. There's no how should I say, there's no shared standard connecting them, so much so that structuring a green sukuk takes more time, it's costlier than structuring a green bond. We need to look at what would be the solution for this, a unified governance framework, for instance, or a Sharia standard that covers this specific product, the ESG that is easy to follow or easy to comply with. Maybe that would create the impetus for this space to grow a bit quicker.
Would you say also, a lot of people say up until 2023, where COP was held in Dubai, were riding the wave of greenium. So, in the sense that they wanted just to issue a lot of sustainability instruments like green or SRI linked products, not just in the Islamic, but in conventional as well. A lot of people were riding that wave of greenium where they could issue these products and, investors would snap up all this stuff. But obviously now, in the Western countries at least anyway, there's been a slowdown of ESG, and a lot of banks, conventional banks, are not taking that much interest in sustainability anymore. Would you say that the sukuk or the green sukuk industry is like looking at it like this? They rode the wave 2-3 years ago, but now they're just like continuing the way they are. They don't really want to go beyond that.
Well, I think this product, because it's a financial product, so it's always about the demand of such products. So it can go like that. It can go like that. Now you see more of the private market, the alternatives going up because that's where the demand is. But I think it's always relevant, although you don't see the uptake. But the principle of ESG, SRI, is still embedded even in private markets. To be honest, even in private markets, they already have the principle embedded, maybe not in the form of a bond or in the form of a sukuk, but it's still a win. It's still there. It's still a win. But I'm not. I don't. I'm not going to sideline the green bonds and the green sukuk because it's always relevant. It's always going to be there. And when we have this unified framework, as I said, between the Sharia and the ESG, these two frameworks, maybe we can see they take up more and more.
I think one of the problems or one of the challenges is that when I remember doing some work for UK IFC, and I was doing research. It's been a few years, but I was doing research on the number of IFIs which had signed up to international frameworks like the Principles for Responsible Investment or the Principles for Responsible Banking, and the actual number of them that actually were signatories. Where they had to enforce PRI, PRB, or any other kind of framework was very low, and they instead adopted to their own. Why do you think like a lot of IFIs do struggle with like implementing international frameworks?
Um, well, I mean, because they are a regulated entity, it's not that easy to implement different frameworks. I don't think it's a problem of the framework nor the problem of the IFI. It's more of the due diligence, the due process that needs to happen. Some would be they persevere more than others. Depending on what the priority areas are. But I guess it doesn't show there's any weaknesses, I suppose, because both banks, they are highly regulated. They have all the prudential standards that they need to meet, and also the fiduciary duty to the stakeholders, etc. And also these frameworks are passed by international committees and everything. So it's more of, I think, the will to take it as far as possible, and that differs between institutions to institutions.
And then obviously within all of this, you have going beyond fixed income. So we've been talking about sukuk a lot and fixed income like products, but how come this hasn't extended to other things? Like equity financing or any kind of like more property financing. It's very, very heavily concentrated in fixed income. Do you
Ah,
see?
you
Do you,
mean product? You mean products, right?
green and sustainable products, Islamic ones.
Okay, green and sustainable products, even other products. I think that's the mm, the thing that you hear in the market right now. There are more and more fixed income products as opposed to the more profit sharing or equity based products, even beyond green or SRI, right? It is true. Actually, there's most products are more skewed towards fixed income structures. But why did it happen? I think that the main question is why did that happen? So the contract like Murabaha, it's operationally clean. It's legally well documented. People understand. It's relatively straightforward to govern as opposed to risk sharing contracts like Musharaka and Mudaraba. They are really, it's an amazing principle, but they require ongoing monitoring and profit and loss transparency, etc., operational integration. That, in most jurisdictions, the industry is not built for that kind of infrastructure or is not prepared as yet for that kind of infrastructure. The next question now is where we are at in terms of the industry, and we know that it's heavily skewed towards fixed income instrument. How can we turn it around? So can we build that infrastructure? How easy is it to build that infrastructure, and would the demand for such products actually justify the investment, the cost in building that infrastructure? I think that is the next question that we should ask. I think we can build that infrastructure. I think there is already demand for risk or profit sharing or equity based contracts, especially with the rise of the private markets, right? And also impact investing to your SRI ESG example just now. And there is, so in short, actually there is commercial demand to finally do this properly. So I think we have to be more, how should I say it, ready to take on that few steps, that additional few steps to really have, a combination of fixed income as well as more and more equity based products. And the stability of the market, the stability of the industry, actually it minimizes the thing that will come to mind first will be it's very risky, etc. But when you have an ecosystem that is stable, is transparent, properly monitored, you really mitigate this risk. And also when you have the big names offering this products, right? And obviously when you have that product, you will match it with the investment side of things, right? So it's not as difficult that as some people may perceive. And I think this is the best time because the more players we have in the market, like what we have currently, the more manageable it is to introduce these equity based products.
I just think to myself, this idea of like, do you think issuers really want to, do they really care? Because at the end of the day, it's about if we talk about Sukuk, just generally, what do the issuers want, right? Are they looking for the best return? Are they looking for diversifying their capital? Is it diversifying their investor base? And are they really interested in things like SRI and equity sharing? And one thing I've said this before, but I don't know if you remember the deal in 2014 when IFIM from the World Bank for immunization of children
Mm.
issued the Sukuk, and the proceeds were used to buy or to develop the immunization for the children. And it was a really nicely structured deal. Everything was very good. And I
Mm.
remember speaking to a portfolio. I think it was $1 billion at that time, if I'm not mistaken. But I remember speaking to a portfolio manager back in 2014 when he bought the notes at the primary when it was issued in the market, and he was really happy. Fulfilled his portfolio. He wasn't like an SRI investor. He was just a normal Sukuk investor at a fund, and he was really happy. He got his return. The issuer got the money. It seemed to all be doing really well for what the proceeds were being used for. But then about a week later, I met up with him, and he said to me, I had to get rid of that quickly the next day. And I was like, why? And then he said, "Oh, because my management committee told me we're not a charity. We're not interested in SRI." This was a Sukuk investor, by the way, saying this. We're not interested in like SRI and stuff like that. I know that was over a decade ago when this was said, and there hasn't been that many kind of groundbreaking deals of like where international entities or other regional ones. I know there's been like a bond issued by Egypt for societal stuff, but why do you think issuers, or what will prompt issuers to issue these kind of products?
Mm. Number one, I think is the investor profile, Hassan. So if we are talking about banks, they're very risk averse. So SRI sukuk means there can be compromise on the returns. So why should we go that route when we can just buy a normal bond or a normal sukuk where the coupon is is very competitive. But you can see now there are new pockets of investors, the demand side, the awqafs, for instance, right? The zakat fund, for instance, and they are, they understand this space. Most of the time, it's about the quality of the quality of the asset. Green doesn't mean you compromise in terms of the returns. I'll give you one example. I looked at one. It's not a sukuk though, but it's a fund. It can be structured as a sukuk, but they structured it as a fixed income fund, and it's not debt. It's not murabaha. Basically, it's more of a leasing fund of a solar, right? And this is for the off taker is the government, and this is the government of Japan, and the tariff is great. Even they don't pay late, not even an hour. They don't pay late. I think it's a combination of a few things. Not We can't just sell SRI. We can't just sell that label. We have to also sell the quality of the assets, the monitoring of the assets, the enhancements, if there's any credit enhancements of the project or the asset, so that the demand side will understand more. So if I just put it out there, this is an SRI product. The take up may be a bit lukewarm, but if I say, okay, this is a fixed income, the off taker is the government of Japan, the tariff is blah blah blah. Oh, by the way, it's also SRI. Then they will receive it in a whole different manner. So I think positioning of this product has to be looked into as well. We can't just put that label, but it's a whole high quality product or investment product.
Wha The question I have then, Maya, you've mentioned this, right? And I'll give you another example of convincing people of Maqasid or SRI or ESG or green. I have a friend of mine who was a Islamic equity manager for a fairly largely London-based fund. They're managing a few billion, and he was trying really hard to set up a Maqasid equities fund within his Islamic fund. And he was getting pushback from a lot of the upper management, and he was saying they just didn't understand, because he said what may appear halal on conventional screens like AOFE or MSCI or any of these other ones, they don't take into account, okay, if we take like a clothing company, the debt is all within the halal ratios. Their business activities on the surface don't appear haram, but at the same time they're using sweatshops in Bangladesh or China or wherever. From a maqasid perspective, this would be really difficult to justify, right? But again, the management didn't seem to understand that. Like, why is it so difficult to convince people to go beyond Sharia screening?
I think it's not just about Sharia. You want to convince people to invest and put their money in something that has the charity label. It's not easy, especially if they are profit maximization. That the goal is profit maximization, and that kind of thing. It's not easy. Of course, they will have a bucket of funds that can go into this type of instruments. Calling it a product that is a Maqasid product or Maqasid aligned product, or an ethical product, is in the substance. You have to read the room. Actually, you have to read the room. If they are, the audience is really particular about the returns and the bottom line, that should go first. It doesn't make the product less ethical or less aligned with Maqasid. Obviously, we want to have to put this Sharia principle at the forefront. But by reading the room, if it's not going to be effective or it's not going to convince the other party, then you have to switch it around and convince them. And then, as a by the way kind of thing, this is a Maqasid product. Even if you don't mention the word Maqasid, it's still aligned with Maqasid, because otherwise it's not Sharia compliant, or otherwise, the Sharia, this is how the Sharia investment guidelines is. So actually, I do this in my day-to-day work. Actually, it's very important to read the room, because how we appreciate certain principles may not be the same as how party A or party B appreciate, because not because they don't want to, but maybe because of lack of understanding. We have better understanding and we believe in certain things, but they may not. So it will take a bit of time. So it's good for them to put one foot in where we position it to meet their requirements, and then they can appreciate it more, and then that's how you can bring more and more Maqasid aligned products or Sharia compliant products to them. So ease them through. I think when we bring something totally different, even the name maybe, like the Arabic names, maybe it's not something that they are used to. So we have to think how to position it so that it is effective. It doesn't make the product less Sharia, because the guidelines are there, the fatwa will be there. So,
Yeah, it just seems, like over the last couple of years with geopolitical situation right now, you don't see many advertised ethical funds or impact investing, although they're still around. They don't really like advertise themselves too much. So I guess you're right? So it's to do with reading the room and the
mm,
environment that you're in. But just sticking on this ESG point, I just want to stick on this ESG point. We know that the UAE, you're based in the UAE. The UAE has been doing a lot to implement a net zero agenda by 2050. Saudi Arabia is trying as well through Vision 2030 and through the next vision as well, and other GCC countries as well. And I know also other OIC countries like Malaysia and Indonesia are trying as well. With these regional transformation programs in places like the UAE and Saudi, how can Islamic finance help,
mm.
achieve their goals?
Okay. One thing, I think it's what UAE, what Saudi is doing in terms of the vision, right? Especially sustainability agenda is one of the main agenda. Is actually creating something historic, and really amazing, I think, because when you have that as a strategic agenda at the topmost level, the possibility of massive mobilization of capital needs to be through ethical channels, because this is the agenda. And Islamic finance should be a natural home for a significant portion of it. If not, then indeed, then we have to look in the mirror. What are we doing wrong, actually? So the opportunity is there. We have to take this opportunity, and obviously Islamic finance is all that sustainable, ethical, etc. It's an inherent part of Sharia. So it should be a natural home for a significant portion of that capital. I think the scholars are ready. The regulatory framework is there. You don't need anything major changes. Maybe certain aspects of it needs a bit more development. And obviously, with that agenda, there will be investor appetite. One aspect that I think is needed further is actually the commercial architecture, so to speak, to channel this efficiently and implement this efficiently, so that it meets the bigger picture and the end game, actually.
Just shifting gears a little bit, you're very involved with like helping Islamic finance in new jurisdictions, and we're seeing a lot of headlines of places like Uzbekistan, Azerbaijan now, and some African countries as well implementing Islamic finance. I think Benin issued their first ever sukuk this year, and other countries as well are looking at issuing sukuk. What potential does Islamic finance have in firstly Central Asia and in Africa?
Well, actually, Central Asia is doing a lot. I'm on the Islamic Finance Advisory Board of AIFC, so I know they are doing a lot on not just creating awareness, but also building the ecosystem for Islamic finance over there. One thing that I learned is that over the years operating across the GCC and Southeast Asia, Central Asia, etc., is that the differences between jurisdictions are more about regulatory culture as opposed to the Sharia principles or the Sharia substance. Because as I mentioned to you earlier, this should be consistent across the board, and the underlying fiqh positions on most mainstream products are actually quite close across the geographies. That's why building an ecosystem that can allow Sharia products to compete on a level playing field with conventional product is very important, and also how regulators interpret and enforce compliance. What disclosure they require, how do they expect audit to be carried out, etc. So it's more of an ecosystem um, aspect or thinking process, I think, more than more than just knowing Sharia, because you have to know precisely how Sharia intersects with the regulatory requirement, and that will actually have a very, I would say, a big impact on the result of whether it's a success story or otherwise.
I don't know if you remember, but Morocco tried, I think, in 2018 or 17 to introduce Islamic finance. I know they had it there for a while in Windows and other products, but they issued the first ever sukuk, I think, in 2018, Moroccan dirham.
Mm,
And I remember speaking to the lawyer who structured that deal, and he was basically saying, it's very difficult with the French system, French style system, because
mm,
Sharia obviously is quite close to common law within the documentation, and with regards to things like ijara assets and inheriting assets, that was very challenging for a French system. So in Morocco, it hasn't really gone off, hasn't really done as well as people had hoped. But I guess like in places like Uzbekistan, where it's a lot more fertile and it's a lot more nascent, let's say, and it doesn't really have much legacy or baggage compared to other markets, right?
I think, yeah, like in Uzbekistan, it's also it's not a common law country, so there's a lot of changes that needs to be made. But for Central Asia, at least my vision of Central Asia, at least, is a harmonized ecosystem. Because if investors go to Kazakhstan, I think the outlook that they want is actually to have access to the whole of Central Asia, not just one country, and then you have to change and then to suit Uzbekistan, and you have to change to suit Kyrgyzstan, for instance. So to have an Islamic ecosystem that is harmonized across these different Central Asian countries, I think this would be really amazing. Right now, I don't think there is. There are different interpretations, different ways of doing things, etc. But hopefully in the future, we can see Central Asia as one huge market. It's like, you have the GCC, and then now you have the Central Asia, a new market for Islamic finance.
Also, shouldn't just say it's just for banking, right? There are fintechs, really outstanding fintechs in Alif,
Mm,
Iman as well, the
correct.
ones that come to my name, doing a lot of stuff. And young people nowadays, they're very much like the Revolut generation, where they don't want to go with the incumbent banks, right? Traditional
Yeah.
legacy banks. So I guess it's getting involved there. And
Yeah.
then what about Africa? Do you see like any opportunities for sub-Saharan Africa?
There is opportunity. There's a lot of opportunity, and I think they are already doing it in some countries. I wouldn't call it emerging market because they have windows. I think over there it's more of variety of products. We need more and more variety of products, and also the support of the regulators, especially the central banks and the capital market authorities. I think that one is, in some countries it's more advanced than others. But from an opportunity perspective, definitely it's huge. It's a huge opportunity. Again, I think from the investors' perspective, if they go to East Africa, West Africa, they want at least something that they can use in multiple countries rather than reinvent the wheel each time, across different countries.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
yeah, and the Sharia part again is consistent. That's why I said it's more of the the regulate the regulatory culture, or the more than the Sharia substance. Yeah.
Mm. Just
Mm.
to wrap up, Maya, you've been in this industry for a really long time. A lot of people would say, Islamic finance is a very male dominated industry. What's it like working as a woman in such a male dominated industry?
Uh, I think it's better now compared to before. When I entered the industry, it was unusual to see women in senior Sharia advisory roles, except probably in Malaysia and in Indonesia to a certain extent. I wouldn't say we are there. We're not, especially in the Middle East. Maybe it's not. Maybe if I may be bold to say, that it's not for the lack of opportunity, but I think maybe we need to encourage more women to actually go into this space. I've worked with the globally renowned scholars all over the world. I've not felt sidelined, biased. It's just that there are more men venturing into this space. That's what I'm trying to say. And now, what has changed over the years is that Islamic finance has internationalized significantly now, and the client base is more diverse. Seriously, it's more diverse, as well as, institutions' expectations are different. They understand more, and talent pool is actually, we have a bigger talent pool currently. So the industry has started to recognize that you don't have to fit a particular profile to do this work or to be in this space and to carry out your duties with excellence. So there's more opportunities, I would say, currently, and for women, I think it's just go there. If you have the interest and go there and position yourself. So even in Saudi, you have the head of Islamic finance in the banks, women. So we can see the opportunities are there. It's just that the numbers of women venturing into this space is lesser than the
Are you optimistic for the next decades? More women in the Islamic finance industry?
I am. I
Very
am.
good.
I
Very
am.
good.
And even more than that, actually, the earlier part of our discussion, Hassan, is the quality of the Sharia advisor. I think it's more than the quantity. As I mentioned to you, we need a Sharia advisor that can hold their own in a conversation where you have different functions with the legal, with the tax, with the risk guys, with the product guys. So you need to have a Sharia advisor that can have substance or this credible voice in such, at the same table. I think this is what we need currently. Really, really, we need this profile. It doesn't matter whether they're men or women.
Fantastic. Maya, tell us any projects you may be working on, any upcoming projects you may be working on.
A number actually. As you know, I do in Sābiq is actually the Sharia operational part. So we are trying to put the different ways and integrated solution in the market to serve both the supply side and the demand side and to do things more efficiently end to end, Sharia driven end to end. I'm looking at new markets. I'm looking at creating strategic partnerships with conventional market authorities, to bring Islamic finance into the mainstream uh, of how they do things, actually, or at least the understanding of Islamic finance, because I think it's important to really bring how we do things to the other, to the conventional players, and so that they are familiar and so that they are comfortable, and that would actually bridge a lot of gaps when you do the actual products and the actual transactions later on. So I'm still operating. I like to operate outside the bubble, actually, so that I'm still doing that, but on a more enhanced value proposition, actually, to look at the whole value chain.
Mashallah, you've done like a lot, and I don't think people really understand the scale of the stuff that you've done.
Yeah.
But before we wrap, what's the best way to reach Sabiq and to reach you?
Yeah. So we have a website, Sābiq, in Saudi. So Sābiq is, the verse stand of Surah Al-Waqi'ah. It means the forerunners. So inshallah, we try. The team, I have an excellent team, and we try to live up to the name. But you can contact me, Hassan. You have my contact
I'll link it in the
details.
show notes. Yeah.
And then also we have our website, and there's a support. So you can just leave us a note, and then happy to take discussions further.
I'll link it in the show notes. But Maya, this has been a really great conversation and a really nice catch up. And I wish you all the best in your new venture. And hopefully we can catch up soon, inshallah.
Sure. Thank you very much.
Take care. Assalamu alaikum.